Welcome to a Mistweaver Monk Mythic Plus guide to Season 2 of The War Within. This guide will touch on talents, both hero talent trees, the rotation, and much more. My goal is to make it easy to follow for any first-time Mistweavers, but with enough depth that returning Mistweavers can jump into this season with an understanding of everything that's changed. My name's ElvinNinja7, let's get into it. Starting with stats, as you level your character, just look for intellect and item level for the biggest boost. Once you're geared or given an option between two similar items, your secondary stat priority for this build is haste, then verse, then crit, then mastery, with haste being a clear front runner and the other three being fairly close and interchangeable. Haste is an incredible stat because it not only lets us do the most healing, but it allows you to react faster and reduce the cooldown of some important rotational spells like Rising Sun Kick. Verse and crit serve similar purposes as raw throughput stats, but verse enhances your survivability a lot as you push higher keys, as well as the shields you're able to apply. Mastery gets a ton of value in your Chi window and then a little bit of value outside of it, so it's not bad if pieces have it, but those stats are better served in haste. Before we jump right into talents, I think it's also important to discuss our core spells and mechanics. You're going to notice that a lot of our core spells are actually damaging spells, and that's because they all lead to more healing thanks to our core mechanics. The biggest to understand is a passive named Ancient Teachings. This converts our damage from Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, Rising Sun Kick, and Crackling Jade Lightning into healing. It's only 30% of the damage, however, but thanks to a very powerful talent Jadefire Teachings, we boost that number to 190% of the damage that we do being converted into healing. So a lot of what we do as a Mistweaver to optimize our healing is maintain Jadefire Teachings at all times, as well as do the most damage that we can to do the most healing possible. Starting off, we have Rising Sun Kick, Blackout Kick, and Tiger Palm. Rising Sun Kick is the biggest single target smack of damage that we have. It has a 10-second cooldown, but the more haste that you have, the more this cooldown can go down. On top of doing very solid damage, this also has a ton of beneficial effects attached to it that make it very important to press as often as possible. There's also Blackout Kick, which does a lot of single target damage and has a 12% chance to reset Rising Sun Kick's cooldown each time it hits an enemy. You can make this hit more times than just once when you press it with a few different ways, one of them being by hitting Tiger Palm. Each time you hit an enemy with Tiger Palm, your next Blackout Kick will hit an additional time, stacking up to 4 times. The other core damage button is Jadefire Stomp. Now, we don't necessarily press this because of the damage that it does, but for the buffs that you get after pressing it. This is how you maintain Jadefire Teachings, because when you press Jadefire Stomp, you get Jadefire Teachings for 15 seconds. This also gives you another massively important buff called Awaken Jadefire. This buff doesn't have a set timer like the 15-second timer of Jadefire Teachings, but instead you get this buff by standing on your Jadefire Stomp and for a few seconds after you move off of it. What this buff does is enhances your damage rotation by making your Blackout Kicks hit 2 additional targets at reduced effectiveness, makes your Tiger Palm strike twice, and it also causes Spinning Crane Kick to heal 3 allies nearby for 110% of the damage that it does. I'll talk more about Spinning Crane Kick later on in the video, but what this buff allows you to do is only have to Tiger Palm twice in order to get to 4 stacks on your next Blackout Kick, and then makes your next Blackout Kick and all the bonus ones that come with it cleave and hit 3 targets. While the cleaving damage is less than it has been in the past, they still behave like Blackout Kick and heal through Ancient Teachings, as well as having a chance to reset Rising Sun Kick each. Just like that, we already have our base rotation that you'll want to spend most of your time executing. First, you want to Jadefire Stomp often enough to maintain Jadefire Teachings. If that buff is about to fall off, press Jadefire Stomp. Next, press Rising Sun Kick when it's off cooldown. It does solid damage, but like I said earlier, it has a lot of non-damaging healing effects that I'll soon get into. Then press Tiger Palm until you have 4 stacks of Teachings of the Monastery, and finally press Blackout Kick. What this rotation is doing is maintaining the buffs that convert your damage into healing, and then maximizing your damage by fully stacking Blackout Kick. This damage will be what maintains high health bars for the group, as well as keeps you high on the damage charts. However, eventually you will have to swap off of this default rotation in order to deal with mechanics like bigger damage instances or spot healing. As for spot healing, we have 4 primary spells to understand. Renewing Mist is a weaker but longer lasting haunt. You have 2 charges, so keep these rolling as they provide a lot of bonus effects during their lifetime. And don't be afraid to apply these mid-combat as they come with an insurance buff with our new tier set. Enveloping Mist is a stronger but shorter haunt that boosts their healing received from you. Having this on an ally can seriously boost their survivability, so if there's damage that you know is coming, casting this on an ally will make healing them that much easier. Next up is Vivify, which is a simple spot heal, but once every 10 seconds it juices up and becomes instant cast. And finally, we have Soothing Mist, which is a channel that links you to an ally. Soothing Mist does a little bit of healing to that ally, but it allows your Enveloping Mist and Vivify cast to be instant. So in a moment where an ally is taking a beating or has a dot on them, you can Soothing Mist them, cast Enveloping Mist, and then spam Vivifies for massive spot healing. If you're quick enough, you can even cast a Renewing Mist on them before that damage to guarantee that they get insured, as well as boosting the healing they receive by you by a whopping 50% for the first 6 seconds. Our spot healing spells and our punch and kick rotation do have a lot of interplay between them, mostly through Rising Sun Kick. Every time that you press Rising Sun Kick, it will apply a short Renewing Mist to an ally and extend every mist hot that you have on your allies by 4 seconds, up to doubling their duration. So as long as you're using your Renewing Mist charges and pressing Rising Sun Kick often in your rotation, you will have some Renewing Mist on your allies at all times. This is important not just because Renewing Mist does a small amount of healing, but mostly because every time that you Vivify, you're also going to cleave some healing onto each ally that has a Renewing Mist on them. So when you do have to stop your rotation to Vivify your party up, it makes the healing much easier the more Renewing Mist that you have active. On top of this, each of your Renewing Mists will boost your insurance healing thanks to your force set. I've shown the talents on screen a few times, but don't worry, they will be in the description for you to import. However, importing them is only half of the battle, so I highly recommend going through and reading each talent to better understand what's passively happening in the background that didn't quite make it into this guide. Also, if you stick around to the end of this guide, I will be talking about some variations to the builds that you might consider to tackle different scenarios. Up until now, we've been talking about the core rotation, but now we're going to bridge into our cooldown section. So there are 2 spells that kind of fit between the cooldown and the rotation section, but are both insanely important to understand. Those are Thunder Focus Tea and Crackling Jade Lightning. Crackling Jade Lightning is a damaging spell that can be cast at ranged that channels damage over a few seconds. This is also one of the spells listed in the passive Ancient Teachings, the passive that makes your damage heal. And thus it also does 190% of its damage as healing if you have Jadefire Teachings active. This doesn't do enough damage alone at all to make it into our rotation, however, thanks to Jade Empowerment, it does. Jade Empowerment is a buff that you get whenever you press your Thunder Focus Tea. This makes your next Crackling Jade Lightning deal a whopping 2,500% more damage, but also cleave 15% of that damage to 4 additional targets. When you have Jade Empowerment and Jadefire Teachings active, your next Crackling Jade Lightning will do so much damage and thus do enough healing to heal through a lot of mechanics. But if you don't have one or both of these buffs active, it's just Crackling Jade Lightning. So how do you get Jade Empowerment? Well, that's where Thunder Focus Tea comes in. Thunder Focus Tea is a spell that has a 30-second cooldown and has 2 charges if you opt for the hero talent tree Master of Harmony. It can enhance your next Rising Sun Kick, Enveloping Mist, Vivify, Renewing Mist, or Expel Harm. The spell that you choose to enhance most often is going to be Rising Sun Kick as it drastically reduces its cooldown, but you also use it on Enveloping Mist to make it an instant cast spot heal that you can use on the move on top of its normal hot effect. And occasionally you high key pushers will have have to use it on Expel Harm before damage to gain a shield. On top of this effect of enhancing one of those spells, you gain a stack of Jade Empowerment when you press Thunder Focus Tea. Note that these stacks don't have a timer, therefore you don't have to follow up your Thunder Focus Tea with the Crackling Jade Lightning immediately after if you don't want to, but also note that Jade Empowerment can only stack up twice. So if you have 2 stacks of Jade Empowerment and need to press Thunder Focus Tea, use one of those charges of Jade Empowerment first and then press your Thunder Focus Tea to avoid overcapping and wasting this powerful effect. Also, be very careful of who you target with Crackling Jade Lightning, because if they die early into its channel, it drastically reduces the damage and healing you do due to the fact that your initial target is the only one taking that 2500% increased damage. Okay, so those are your rotational spells, but they won't be enough to heal an entire dungeon. Eventually, you're going to need to use major healing cooldowns to deal with the damage. So what does Mistweaver have? Well, I've already touched on Jade Empowerment, which does enough healing to be considered a healing cooldown, but outside of that, you have Sheilun's Gift, Revival, and I like to include Life Cocoon here, and then the big cooldown, Chi-Ji. Sheilun's Gift will be charging up as you're in combat, spawning a puddle every 4 seconds, up to 10 puddles. When you cast this spell, it consumes all puddles and heals all allies depending on how many puddles were consumed. You're going to want to cast this at around 8 stacks, as letting it sit at 10 stacks is just wasting its potential, but casting it at any less than 7 stacks could make it do too little healing to be worth pressing. This cooldown does moderate healing, so it's often paired with other cooldowns or a bunch of Vivify casts in order to handle a mechanic. Next up is Revival, which is a juicy AoE heal that also can act as a mini mass dispel. You can use this for heavy AoE damage, but it gets its best use when it's also dispelling. Life Cocoon is a large shield that goes on one ally, and I include it in this section because it can handle heavy single target mechanics, but also can act as our best tank external. Finally, we have Chi-Ji, our biggest burst of healing available. Chi-Ji is a 1-minute cooldown that lasts 12 seconds and adds mastery procs to our kicks, adding insane spot heals each time that Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick hit an enemy. Also, every time you kick an enemy, it gives you a stack of Chi-Ji, taking a third of the mana cost and cast time of your next Enveloping Mist off. So you can play heavily into those mastery procs for big healing in the moment, and also weave in Enveloping Mist casts to apply healing bonuses and extend the value of your Chi-Ji beyond its 12-second window, making it an incredibly diverse cooldown. In Season 1, you had to have more than one target to cleave off of in order for your Blackout Kicks to kick up the max mastery procs. But in Season 2, you get that full effect each time Blackout Kick connects with your initial target, meaning that you don't need to cleave in order to get its full effectiveness. So even if you're just fighting a single target boss, Tiger Palming twice to stack up your Blackout Kick and then pressing Blackout Kick will do giant bursts of AoE healing. In order to get the maximum value out of Chi-Ji, you will want to spend a few globals before you press it in order to prep it up. But all that this means is Tiger Palming to stack up your next Blackout Kick and then refreshing your Jadefire Teachings buff so that it's active during that whole entire Chi-Ji window and you don't have to waste a global during it to reapply it. Also, you can apply your 2 Renewing Mist charges before dropping Chi-Ji as well, if you have enough time to do that. Then you press Chi-Ji ideally just before the damage hits your party, since it does apply a small shield to everyone, and then right after that damage hits, you press Blackout Kick for a burst of healing. Then you cycle 2 Tiger Palms and Blackout Kick over and over. If everyone's sitting at full health and you have Blackout Kick stacked up and ready to go, instead of wasting it, use this time to cast that instant Enveloping Mist cast that Chi-Ji gives you. As you push higher keys, the healing checks are going to get a bit more intense, so if you need these cooldowns like Sheilun's Gift and Revival to heal more, you can also cast Enveloping Mist on your allies and Rising Sun Kick to extend those hots before the damage hits to get that much more healing. Now let's talk about our hero talents. Conduit of the Celestials is your more defensive option, as it gives you a mini healing cooldown Celestial Conduit that pulses damage and healing over a channel. I recommend that newer Mistweavers take this talent tree, as having another mini cooldown can really help you learn the ropes of the dungeons in the beginning. However, depending on the dungeon tuning when this patch goes live, there may also be incredibly high heal checks, where having this additional cooldown can help even returning players handle those mechanics. If you do opt for this tree, the only real change to your rotation is that occasionally you're going to get a buff called Strength of the Black Ox, which makes your next Enveloping Mist quicker to cast, but also come with a small shield to your party. All you do is just cast Enveloping Mist once you get this proc, so that the shields really help smooth out the damage. As for the other hero talent tree, it adds a lot more damage. Master of Harmony plays around your Thunder Focus Tea, which is why it gives you a second charge of that to use. To oversimplify this hero talent tree, I like to explain it like this. Think of it like your character is holding a bucket. Every time you heal or do some amount of damage, you're going to store a bit of that damage or healing into the bucket as a buff called Vitality. Whenever you press Thunder Focus Tea, your spells are going to start drawing from that bucket of Vitality to either do more damage if they're one of these damaging spells, or to do more healing if they're a healing spell. You only have 10 seconds of this vitality drawing effect, and if you don't use it all, the rest does go to waste. The general use of this is to try and get as much damage out of it. So you're going to Thunder Focus Tea, Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, for example, to try and apply that dot to your target and then enhance that dot by hitting them more. But before heal checks, you can also use this vitality for healing by simply casting healing spells on your allies that need healing in order to apply it as a hot instead of its normal dot. Good ways to spread this are by casting Enveloping Mist around on your allies. You can cast Shaylun's Gift to just spread it instantly on your allies that needed that healing, and then applying Renewing Mist also works as well. Generally, in order to get the best use out of your vitality, you're going to want to max it out, or at least get close to max before you press your Thunder Focus Tea to start drawing on that vitality. Now, before we get into the talent variations, we still need to talk about Spinning Crane Kick. It did get a damage buff coming into the season, and it still does do healing if you have Awakened Jadefire active, but just keep in mind that while you're spinning, you aren't gaining all of the other buffs of your Rising Sun Kick rotation. So for that reason, I would only advise pressing it with its damage in mind if the enemy target count is 8 or more, and only after you've Tiger Palm twice so that you're ready to drop Chi-Chi if things start to go bad. There are a few big AoE pools that I would Spinning Crane Kick for, like the one at the beginning of Cinder Brew or on the left side of Priory, but in general, those packs do so much damage that Spinning Crane Kick starts to fall behind in the healing department, and then I would just have to drop Chi-Chi and get back to that single target damage rotation anyways to catch up in healing. So although Spinning Crane Kick can do pretty good damage at lower pool counts than it used to, just be very careful because if the tuning stays like how it was on PTR, I personally would not advise relying on this for its healing aspect, unless you are sure that it can get the job done. Outside of that, make sure you're using your stun, your kick, and your defensives, as well as Expel Harm to do a big single target spot heal on yourself. The final thing that I want to touch on is talent variations. I think this section can be helpful to understand when and why you would swap away from this standard build, but also it can help future-proof this guide to handle any tuning and some buffs or nerfs to dungeons or our healing sources. Like I said, this is the standard build that I would recommend for the most keys, and it will be in the description below, and we've already touched on why and when you would opt for either hero talent tree. Outside of that, you may want more spot healing and not feel the need for as much AoE heals in a given dungeon. So for this, you can talent into Emperor's Legacy to change Shaylun's Gift from an AoE heal into a massive spot heal. I've also mentioned that there will be some heal checks that are more intensive than others, and taking the talent Peer into Peace could be helpful to allow you to blanket Enveloping Mist quicker across your party, making those heal checks easier to set up for and then heal through. There are also some dungeons like Theater of Pain where having a Soothe can be really beneficial, so swapping into pressure points is highly advised for that dungeon. Finally, depending on how groups handle certain dungeons, you may see some people opt for Jade Bond over Gift of the Celestials. All this does is it enhances the strength of your Chi during that cooldown, but it comes at the cost of making a 2-minute cooldown instead of a 1-minute cooldown. What this does on paper is it allows for bigger, more explosive pools, but the only dungeon that I found having a 2-minute Chi cooldown even remotely acceptable was Priory, and even there I preferred 1-minute Chi. But just in case you start seeing people opt for Jade Bond and you're wondering why, that's likely why. They probably have an organized group and just do gigantic pools. And with that, you are ready to tackle any dungeon as Mistweaver. My goal was to help you understand what the rotation is and why it is that way, as well as help you understand the tools that you have to supplement that rotation and handle anything a dungeon can throw at you. If you still have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. While you're down there, make sure and like and subscribe as it helps me continue to make guides like this one. And if you want to see this build in action, I stream on both YouTube and Twitch, both having the same name, LBNinja7. As always, thank you so much for watching this guide and for supporting this channel, and a special thanks to the patrons that keep this channel going. I'll see you guys on the leaderboards. Until then, take care.